right, let's dive right in. Today, we're all about getting prepped for those UPSC 2025 prelims and specifically current affairs.
Absolutely. Think of this as your cheat sheet to really understanding what's been happening in India and the world.
Perfect. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started with the Indian economy. It's been a bit of a mixed bag, wouldn't you say?
Definitely mixed.
Yeah. I mean, on one hand, we've got record defense production. We're talking a jump to 1.27 lakh crore. That's like a 16.7% increase. Looks like the Atmanirbharta push is really starting to show results.
It's definitely a sign of progress towards self-reliance, especially when it comes to defense. But, the economy is a complex thing.
For sure.
There are a lot of factors to consider. And while, yeah, those defense achievements are something to celebrate, we can't ignore other things. Take remittances, for example. They're actually slowing down.
Oh, really?
Yeah, projections for growth in 2024 are only around 3.7%. That's less than half the growth we saw in 2023.
Wow, it's a pretty significant drop.
It is. And those global factors, things like oil prices always fluctuating, shifts in the labor markets around the world, they all have a ripple effect.
Absolutely.
Speaking of ripple effects, though, another thing to watch closely is credit growth.
Okay.
On the surface, it might seem like rapid credit growth is a good thing, but it can be a bit of a double-edged sword.
How so?
Well, if it's not managed carefully, it could lead to some risks down the line. One indicator to keep an eye on is the credit deposit ratio, the CD ratio. It peaked at 78.8% in December of 2023.
Okay, but what does that number actually tell us? For those of us who aren't, economists.
Sure, think of it this way. The CD ratio shows how much of a bank's deposits they're using to give out loans.
Oh, I see.
A higher ratio, like the one we're seeing now, means banks are lending out a larger portion of the money people have deposited.
Okay, so that means they have less in reserve.
Right, exactly. And what's interesting is over 75% of the banks with CD ratios above 75% are private sector banks. So it does raise some questions about whether this lending trend can be sustained in the long run.
It's all about finding that sweet spot,
Yeah.
the balance between growth and stability.
Yeah.
Right. Which I guess brings us to the matter of fiscal deficits.
Right, and it's important to consider not just the government's perspective, but also international assessments. Like, for instance, S&P has maintained a cautious optimism about India's fiscal future.
Okay.
They've acknowledged the growth potential, but they're also stressing the need for continued fiscal discipline. It's something to keep in mind, especially as you're studying economic policies for the exam.
Great point. Lots to consider on the economic front.
Ah,
All right, let's switch gears a bit and talk about government schemes. It seems like there's been a whole flurry of activity lately, everything from supporting farmers to, boosting education and healthcare.
it's true. There are a lot of schemes out there, and for the UPSC exam, it's crucial to go beyond just memorizing names. You need to understand what each scheme is really trying to achieve, how it's trying to solve real-world problems. Take the Shuryash scheme, for example.
All right.
It's specifically designed to help scheduled caste students access quality education. It's a really critical step towards social and economic empowerment for those communities.
It's not just about knowing the name, right?
Yeah.
You have to understand the why behind it.
Exactly.
Okay, so what about some of the other schemes? What about the UW1 portal? I've heard a bit about that one.
Oh, yeah. UW1 is all about revolutionizing maternal and child health care.
How so?
Well, it's a perfect example of how technology is being integrated into public service delivery. By leveraging real-time data and tracking, the portal is meant to improve things like vaccination coverage and ultimately, save lives.
So it's connecting the dots between what's happening now with technology and potential questions that can come up on the exam.
Exactly.
Okay, what about the revamped education loan scheme? That seems like it could be pretty significant, especially for students.
Absolutely, it's a big deal. The revamped scheme has raised the maximum loan limit to 7.5 lakh, which makes higher education more accessible for a lot more people.
Okay.
Plus, they've expanded eligibility, so now you can get loans from NBFCs and small finance banks. It just broadens access to credit overall.
Makes sense. So for aspiring students, especially those who might not have, say, access to traditional bank loans, this could be a game changer.
Definitely. It's all about removing those barriers to opportunity, right? And that's really a theme you see across a lot of these government schemes, whether it's empowering farmers through PM Kisan or, supporting startups with Startup India. The underlying goal is always to create a more equitable and prosperous society. These are key concepts to keep in mind as you study for the prelims.
Like this puzzle, right? You have all these individual schemes, but you have to see how they fit into this larger picture of governance and social change. But how do we make sure that these schemes are actually reaching the people they're meant to help?
That's where effective implementation and monitoring come into play.
Right.
We need systems in place to track progress, to identify any bottlenecks, and to be able to adapt and make corrections along the way.
Yeah, makes sense.
And when you're thinking about these things for the UPSC exam, it's good to think critically. What are the challenges involved? Is there potential for corruption? How can technology be used to improve transparency and accountability? Those sorts of analytical points can really elevate your answers.
Makes sense. Okay, with all of that in mind, let's dive into the world of polity and governance. It's been a pretty eventful year with some big legal pronouncements and, of course, a few heated debates as well.
Definitely. One of the hottest topics has been the jurisdiction of the CSE. When can they investigate cases in a state, especially when a state has withdrawn general consent?
Ah, yes, the classic tussle between central authority and state autonomy. It's a really fundamental aspect of our federal structure.
Exactly. And the Supreme Court this year has weighed in on this, essentially upholding the principle of federalism. They affirmed that the CBI can't operate in a state if that state hasn't given its consent.
Interesting. So for cases that fall under the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act, the CBI would need specific consent from the state government for each investigation.
That's right. So make sure you're familiar with that act and what it means.
Okay, will do. So I guess this is a win for those who argue for greater state autonomy, right?
It definitely reinforces the importance of cooperative federalism, but it does raise some questions. For example, how will this impact investigations that cross state lines?
Right.
It's something to think about as you study.
Definitely some complexities there.
Okay.
All right, let's shift gears a bit and talk about mineral taxation.
This is a fascinating one, especially because it has both economic and legal implications. The Supreme Court recently issued a landmark judgment that basically empowers states to levy taxes on mineral rights.
So wait, what does that mean exactly? Does that mean states now have more control over the revenue they generate from their own resources?
Exactly. It's a pretty significant shift in the balance of power when it comes to resource management. And this could have a big impact on mining investments and how mining companies operate across the country. Think about the implications for states that are rich in resources like coal or iron ore.
Right.
How will this affect the industries that depend on those minerals? It's definitely something to watch.
Lots of ripple effects to consider. So it's all about balancing the state's need for revenue with the need to keep the mining sector going strong.
Exactly. And remember, this is a fluid situation. The long-term impact of this judgment is still unfolding, which makes it a key area to watch for your UPSC preparations.
Okay, so let's wrap up this segment of our deep dive with something that's been generating a lot of controversy. The expunction of unparliamentary remarks from parliamentary records.
This is a complex issue with major implications for free speech, for transparency, even for how our democracy functions. It's something that could definitely come up in your exam, so it's important to really understand the nuances.
So why is expunction so controversial?
Yeah.
What are the main points of contention?
Well, on one hand, proponents argue that it's necessary to maintain decorum and dignity in Parliament. Certain language just isn't acceptable in that context.
Makes sense.
They believe that removing those remarks from the record helps create an environment where debates can be more constructive and respectful.
Right, but what about the other side? What do critics of expunction have to say?
Critics argue that it can be used to stifle dissent and limit free expression. They point out that even if a remark is considered unparliamentary, it still reflects the views of an elected representative, right?
Right.
So removing it from the record could be seen as a form of censorship, and it raises questions about accountability, about the public's right to know. You really need to consider both sides of this debate carefully.
It's a tough one, isn't it? Balancing the need for a certain level of decorum with the need to protect free speech. There are no easy answers there.
Exactly. And this debate is likely to continue as we try to navigate the evolving landscape of political discourse in the digital age. Pay attention to any new developments or legal challenges that come up. It could be relevant for your exam.
Will do. All right, let's shift our focus now to the environment and ecology. This is an area that always features prominently on the UPSC exams.
Right, and this year has been no exception. We've seen plenty of environmental challenges, from devastating landslides to, the ongoing struggle to protect endangered species.
Let's talk about those landslides for a minute. We've seen them happen repeatedly, especially in places like Kerala. Why are those areas so vulnerable to landslides?
Well, geography plays a big role. The Western Ghats, with their steep slopes and the amount of rainfall they get, are naturally prone to landslides. But then you add human activities into the mix. Things like deforestation, quarrying, construction, it all adds up. It's a stark reminder that when we damage the environment, we often pay a price.
Yeah. It's about understanding those connections, right? How natural systems and human activities are constantly interacting.
Exactly.
So what's being done to try and mitigate the risks of these landslides?
India has implemented some measures. One of the most significant is the National Landslide Susceptibility Mapping Program. Basically, they're trying to identify areas that are at high risk.
Okay.
And this data helps authorities implement targeted interventions, things like early warning systems and land use regulations to try to prevent those disasters from happening.
It sounds like a good first step, but is it enough? I mean, what more needs to be done?
We need a multi-pronged approach. We need sustainable land management practices, stricter enforcement of environmental regulations, and we need communities to be involved in disaster preparedness. And of course, we can't ignore climate change.
Right.
It's intensifying weather patterns, making events like landslides more unpredictable and more frequent. It's a complex issue with no easy solutions.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to another pressing environmental concern, the conservation of the great Indian bustard. It's really sad to see such a magnificent creature on the brink of extinction.
It is. But there's still hope. The government has launched this comprehensive recovery program for the bustard, which includes habitat restoration, captive breeding, even community engagement. They're really trying to cover all the bases.
So it's a multifaceted approach, recognizing that you have to address both the ecological and the social factors, right?
Exactly. And it highlights the growing understanding that if conservation is going to work, it has to involve local communities. For the UPSC exam, it's important to think about the challenges involved in balancing development with conservation, and also the role that awareness campaigns can play in changing people's attitudes and behaviors.
Great points. Okay, let's shift gears now and talk about some of the exciting things that are happening in the world of science and technology. India is really making a mark in this area.
It is. Space exploration, in particular, has been a highlight. ISRO, in collaboration with Australia, is actually getting ready to launch the Space MATRI mission. They're going to be sending a 450-kilogram spacecraft into space.
Wow, that's impressive. So what's the mission all about?
It's called the Optimus spacecraft, and it will be studying solar winds.
Solar winds.
Yeah, and their impact on Earth's atmosphere. It's part of this larger effort to understand space weather and how it could affect us here on Earth. Things like disruptions to communication systems and power grids.
It's amazing, isn't it, how we're pushing the boundaries of knowledge, exploring the mysteries of the universe, but it all comes back to very real and practical applications here on Earth.
Absolutely.
So what else is grabbing headlines in science and tech?
3D hologram technology is another area where India is making strides. It's incredible to think about the potential applications, everything from medical training to entertainment.
3D holograms.
Yeah.
That sounds like something straight out of a movie.
Right. It does sound futuristic, but it's becoming a reality. We can now create these incredibly lifelike and interactive images. Imagine going to a virtual concert where it feels like the performers are right there in front of you.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. So besides entertainment, what are some of the practical uses for this technology?
Well, in medicine, they can be used to create realistic simulations for training surgeons.
Oh, I see.
It allows doctors to practice complex procedures in a safe environment before they actually operate on a patient. It's a game changer for medical education and could lead to much better patient outcomes.
That's incredible. It's really pushing the boundaries of what's possible, using technology to make a real difference in people's lives.
It is, and it just shows that even in the most unexpected places, we can find solutions to some of our biggest challenges.
All right, before we move on from science and tech, I want to touch on one more development that I found fascinating. What can you tell us about transposons?
Oh, transposons, sometimes called jumping genes.
Right, jumping genes.
They're segments of DNA that could actually move around within a genome. For a long time, they were considered junk DNA, but now research is suggesting that they could actually be incredibly useful.
Oh, interesting. In what way?
Well, they could hold the key to new possibilities in gene editing. Scientists are exploring how to use transposons to insert, modify, or even delete genes.
Wow. So these jumping genes might be the tool we need to tackle genetic diseases.
Potentially, yeah. It could lead to new therapies, new ways to enhance crop yields, all sorts of things. It's a really exciting area of research with a lot of potential benefits.
It's incredible to think that nature itself might hold the solutions to some of our biggest challenges. We just have to figure out how to harness those tools.
Okay.
All right, time to shift gears one last time and explore the world of international relations. This is a crucial area for the UPSC exams, right?
Definitely. You need to have a good grasp of global events and how India is positioning itself on the world stage.
Right. It's been a year of shifting alliances, complex geopolitical dynamics, and some pretty significant events. Where do we even begin?
Well, one relationship that's been in the spotlight this year is the one between India and Russia. Back in July, Prime Minister Name made an official visit to Russia for the 22nd India-Russia Annual Summit. It was a pretty big deal.
How so?
Well, these annual summits had been paused for a while, so this visit marked a resumption of that dialogue.
I see.
It sent a clear message about the strategic partnership between the two countries, despite all the geopolitical complexities and, the situation in Ukraine.
So despite all of that, India and Russia are committed to maintaining their close ties.
It seems that way, yes. And the summit resulted in a number of agreements on things like defense cooperation, trade, and energy partnerships. It shows how India often has to navigate this delicate balance in its foreign policy.
What do you mean?
Well, on one hand, there's the desire for strategic autonomy, the ability to make independent decisions.
Right.
But on the other hand, there's the need to maintain strong relationships with key partners like Russia.
It's about understanding those historical ties, current geopolitical pressures, and India's own strategic interests in the region.
Exactly. And that's just one example of the complex relationships India has to manage on the global stage.
Absolutely. So moving on from Russia, let's talk about a region that's been gaining a lot of strategic importance of the Pacific Islands.
Right. The Pacific Islands Forum, or PIF, has become a real focal point for geopolitical competition. You've got major powers like China, the United States, and Australia all vying for influence there.
And where does India fit into all of this?
Well, India's been actively engaging with the PIF countries, recognizing how important they are strategically, especially in the Indo-Pacific region. In fact, India hosted the second Forum for Indo-Pacific Islands Cooperation, or FIPIC Summit, back in 2015.
I see. So it's about building those partnerships, promoting cooperation, and strengthening ties.
Exactly. And India's approach has been to focus on things like climate change, sustainable development, and maritime security, which are all issues that the Pacific Island nations are very concerned about.
So finding common ground, working together to tackle shared challenges.
Precisely. And this approach has been well received by the PIF countries. They see India as a reliable partner.
Okay, let's turn our attention to another region that's facing some serious security challenges, the Western Indian Ocean region, or WIOR.
That's right. The WIOR has become a hotbed for maritime threats, from piracy and smuggling to illegal fishing and terrorism.
And those threats don't just impact the countries in the region, right?
No, they have global implications. They can disrupt shipping lanes, impact economies, and create instability.
So what's India doing to address these challenges?
India has taken a proactive approach to enhance maritime security in the WIOR. They've deployed naval assets to patrol the region, they've participated in joint exercises with regional partners, and they've even established mechanisms to share information and improve coordination.
So it's about taking concrete steps to ensure the safety and stability of the region.
Yeah.
What are some of the obstacles India faces in this effort?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is simply the vastness of the region and the limited resources that are available. And then there's the need for greater cooperation among all the countries in the region. That can be tricky given the diverse interests and political complexities.
It's a tough job, but crucial for India's own security and its role as a regional power.
Exactly. It aligns with India's vision of being a net security provider in the Indian Ocean.
Okay, let's wrap up this part of our deep dives with a look at a major global event that's dominated headlines, the conflict in Ukraine.
This conflict, which started early in 2024, has had a ripple effect on everything. You've got the humanitarian crisis, global supply chains disrupted, and increased geopolitical tensions, and the world is watching how India responds.
So what has India's stance been?
India has maintained a neutral position, calling for a peaceful resolution through dialogue and diplomacy.
Well,
They've provided humanitarian aid to Ukraine, but they've stopped short of condemning Russia's actions.
it's a delicate balancing act, isn't it?
It is. India is trying to uphold international law while also looking after its own strategic interests. And this nuanced approach has drawn both praise and criticism. You should familiarize yourself with the different arguments surrounding India's stance on the conflict. It's a complex situation.
Absolutely. Lots to think about there.
Back for more. Ready to jump back into the world of current affairs.
Absolutely. We covered a lot of ground in the first part, but I'm eager to dive deeper.
Great. Well, why don't we pick up where we left off, with polity and governance. There's this topic that's always relevant, especially for those UPSC exams, domicile-based reservation.
Yeah, I've heard that's been a pretty hot topic lately.
It has been. Several states are either implementing or considering policies that give preference to local residents when it comes to state government jobs.
It's that whole debate about balancing national unity with regional interests?
Yeah, exactly. And there are strong arguments on both sides.
Well, can you break it down for us?
Sure. So the folks who support domicile-based reservation, they say it's necessary to even things out, address regional imbalances.
I see.
They argue that some regions might be lagging behind in terms of development.
Right.
And that giving preference to locals helps boost economic growth and close those gaps.
That makes sense. If you want to develop a particular region, prioritizing people who live there seems logical.
Right. But then you have the critics who say, hold on, doesn't this go against the idea of equality that's in our Constitution? Yeah, that's a good point.
They argue that it creates barriers, prevent people from moving freely between states to find work.
Right.
And it could lead to a fragmented job market. Is it really fair? Does everyone have an equal opportunity if your birthplace determines your chances?
It's a tough one. It's that classic dilemma of balancing the needs of different regions with the need for a unified nation where everyone has equal opportunities.
Exactly. And this debate isn't new. There have been court cases, Supreme Court judgments, all sorts of things.
Oh, so this is definitely something that could come up on the UPSC exam.
It definitely could. Make sure you're familiar with those cases, those legal arguments.
Okay, I'll make a note of that. All right, let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that's kind of at the intersection of governance and technology, digital public infrastructure, or DPI.
DPI. It's basically all those digital systems and platforms that we rely on for essential public services.
Oh, I see. So like Aadhaar, UPI, Cowenyan, things like that. Exactly. Those are all great examples of DPI. It's all about using technology to make the public sector more efficient, more inclusive, more accessible.
And India's been a real leader in this area, right?
Oh, absolutely. India's showcasing to the world how transformative these digital systems can be.
Yeah.
And other countries are taking notice. They're looking to India for inspiration, trying to figure out how they can replicate our successes.
Wow, that's impressive. Why do you think India has been so successful in implementing DPI?
Well, there are a few factors at play. First, India has a massive population, and it's growing rapidly.
Right.
That creates this huge demand for solutions that are efficient and can be scaled up quickly.
Makes sense.
Second, you have strong political will. The government has been very supportive of digital initiatives.
Okay.
And third, we can't forget that India has a thriving tech sector. They've been able to come up with some really innovative solutions.
It's like all these things came together at the right time to make this digital transformation happen.
Exactly. But it's not all smooth sailing. There are challenges, too.
Like what?
Well, one big challenge is interoperability.
What does that mean?
Basically, making sure that all these different digital systems can talk to each other, that data can flow smoothly between them.
So it's not enough to just build individual systems. You have to make sure they work together.
Exactly. If you don't, you end up with these digital silos, and the whole thing becomes much less effective.
Right. And I guess another challenge would be privacy and security, right?
Well, absolutely. That's a huge concern. We're collecting so much data now, we have to make sure it's protected, that there are strong safeguards in place to prevent misuse or breaches.
Especially when you're dealing with sensitive personal information, right?
Right. We don't want to create a system that puts people's privacy at risk. And then there's the issue of access. How do we make sure that everyone can benefit from DPI?
Right.
It's not just about having the technology. It's about making sure everyone can use it, regardless of where they live, their economic situation, or their digital literacy.
That's a really important point. It has to be inclusive if it's going to truly transform society. Okay, let's move on to a different aspect of the economy, finance. Specifically, credit rating agencies, or CRAs. What role do they play?
CRAs are essential players in the financial world. They're the ones who assess how creditworthy borrowers are.
No?
So whether it's individuals, businesses, or even governments, they look at their ability to repay debts and assign them a credit rating.
Ah, so it's like a report card for borrowers.
Right.
It helps investors decide who to lend money to, right?
Exactly. A higher rating generally means less risk, and a lower rating means more risk. And these ratings have a big impact on borrowing costs, on investment decisions, even on overall market confidence.
So they have a lot of power.
They do, but there have been concerns about their role, especially after some of the financial crises we've seen.
Yeah, I can see how that could be a problem.
One of the biggest concerns is the potential for conflicts of interest.
How so?
Well, the CRAs are actually paid by the very entities they're rating.
Oh, I see. So there's a worry that they might be tempted to give a good rating to keep a client happy, even if it's not entirely accurate.
Exactly. That could distort things, lead to bad investment decisions. So there's been this push for greater transparency and accountability.
So that investors can trust that the ratings are objective.
Exactly. Regulators all over the world have been working to strengthen oversight of these agencies, make them more transparent, improve governance, increase competition.
Okay, so there's a recognition that things need to change. Now, I want to ask you about a specific financial instrument, inverse ETFs.
Inverse ETFs, sometimes called short ETFs or bear ETFs, are a bit different from your typical ETF.
How so?
They're designed to make money when the market goes down.
Wait, so you actually profit when things are bad?
Exactly. It might sound counterintuitive, but that's how they're set up. They move in the opposite direction of the underlying asset or index. They're basically betting against the market.
That's an interesting concept. So how do they actually work?
Well, they use derivatives, things like futures, contracts, and options, to create a portfolio that's designed to go down when the market goes up and vice versa.
Sounds complicated. And probably risky.
You're right. They are complex and carry significant risks. They're not really suitable for the average investor. You have to really know what you're doing to use these effectively.
Okay, let's switch gears again and talk about something that's been in the news a lot lately, global glacier melt.
It's a big concern. All over the world, glaciers are melting at an alarming rate.
And that's because of climate change, right?
Right. Rising temperatures are the main driver. And this has huge implications, for water resources, for ecosystems, even for global sea levels. It's a serious problem.
Absolutely. It's like a domino effect, right?
Right.
One thing impacts another, and it all adds up to this big, complex crisis.
It does. And the effects are far-reaching. We're talking about less fresh water for drinking, for irrigation, for hydropower. We're talking about ecosystems getting disrupted. We're talking about coastal communities being threatened by rising sea levels.
It's pretty scary when you think about it. Yeah. And the situation is especially bad in the Himalayas.
It is. The Himalayan glaciers are a vital source of water for billions of people. If they disappear, it's going to be a major problem.
So what can we do about it?
Scientists and policymakers are looking at a lot of different options. Some are focused on mitigation, trying to slow down climate change itself. Others are focused on adaptation, figuring out how to cope with the changes that are already happening.
Okay.
One area that's getting a lot of attention is geoengineering.
Geoengineering, what's that?
It's basically the idea of deliberately intervening in Earth's climate system on a large scale.
Wow, that sounds pretty ambitious and maybe a little risky.
It does, and it is. It's a controversial approach.
Sure.
Some of the ideas being discussed include things like solar radiation management, which would involve reflecting sunlight back into space.
Okay.
And then there's carbon dioxide removal, which would involve taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere.
It's like something out of a science fiction movie.
It is. But it shows how serious the situation is. People are willing to consider some pretty radical solutions.
What about adaptation strategies? What are some of the things being done there?
Well, adaptation is all about reducing our vulnerability to the impacts of climate change. So things like improving water management, developing crops that can withstand drought, building seawalls to protect coastal areas.
It's about accepting that these changes are happening and figuring out how to live with them.
Exactly. And there are some pretty innovative things happening. In the Andes, for example, they're using artificial glaciers to store water.
Artificial glaciers?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And in the Alps, they're building barriers to prevent avalanches and reinforcing slopes to stop landslides. And along coastlines, people are restoring mangrove forests, which help protect against rising sea levels.
Wow, so there's a lot of creativity going into solving these problems. Okay, let's move on to a different environmental topic, deep sea mining.
This is a new frontier, but it's gaining a lot of attention. Basically, it involves extracting minerals from the seabed way down deep.
And why are we interested in doing that?
Well, we need those minerals. Things like cobalt, nickel, manganese,
What are they used for?
all sorts of things. Smartphones, electric vehicles, renewable energy systems. As demand for those technologies grows, so does demand for the minerals they require.
I see. But I imagine there are some environmental concerns, right?
Definitely. Deep sea mining could disrupt ecosystems, damage habitats, release toxins into the water, create noise pollution that harms marine life.
So it's another case of balancing economic benefits against environmental risks.
Exactly. And the problem is, we don't know enough about the deep sea to fully understand the risks.
It's kind of a gamble.
It is. And that's why this is such a contentious issue. We have to figure out if it's worth it. Okay, let's shift gears one more time and talk about some of the incredible things happening in healthcare. I wanted to ask you about mRNA technology and its use in vaccines.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that. It's a totally new approach, right?
It is. It's revolutionizing vaccine development. Instead of using a weakened or inactive virus, mRNA vaccines actually deliver genetic instructions to our cells.
Genetic instructions? What do you mean?
It's like giving our bodies a blueprint to build the viral proteins themselves.
Oh,
The mRNA acts like a messenger, telling our cells to make these proteins, and then our immune system recognizes them as foreign and mounts an attack, creating antibodies to fight off the real virus if we ever encounter it.
so we're basically teaching our bodies how to defend themselves.
Exactly. It's pretty amazing. And it has some big advantages over traditional vaccines.
Like what?
Well, they're quicker to produce, they're very effective at preventing disease, and they seem to be very safe.
I remember reading about how the COVID-19 pandemic really accelerated the development of this technology.
It did, and now scientists are looking at using it for other diseases too, like cancer and HIV. There's just so much potential here.
It's really groundbreaking. Makes you wonder what other breakthroughs are just around the corner.
Okay, let's wrap up this part of our deep dive with something that's truly out of this world, an underground cave on the moon.
I know, right? Researchers have been analyzing data from Japan's Kaguya lunar orbiter, and they found evidence of this huge cave. They think it's an ancient lava tube, basically a tunnel formed by flowing lava billions of years ago.
Wow, so it's like a window into the moon's past. What's so special about this cave?
Well, it could actually be a really valuable resource for future lunar missions. It could offer protection from radiation, extreme temperatures, meteorite impacts. It's like a natural shelter.
A lunar bunker. That's incredible.
It is. It could make it much easier to establish a long-term human presence on the moon. Think about the possibilities for research, for resource exploration, even for potential habitation. It's amazing how much we still have to learn about the moon. Every new discovery opens up a whole new world of possibilities. All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We've explored the economy, we've navigated the complexities of politics and governance, and we've even ventured into the realm of science and technology. But now, it's time for something a little different.
Yeah, let's immerse ourselves in the world of culture, those developments that really shape our understanding of the world and of ourselves, you know?
Absolutely. So much to explore there.
It is, and it's the perfect way to round out our deep dive.
Okay, so where do we begin?
Well, how about a discovery that's really sent shockwaves through the archaeological world, the unearthing of the world's oldest known cave painting?
Oh, wow. I think I read something about that.
It's an extraordinary find. It's located inside this cave, Ling Karampong, in Sulawesi, Indonesia, and it completely changes what we thought we knew about the origins of art.
How so?
Well, this painting dates back at least 51,200 years. That's thousands of years older than any other cave art we've found before.
That's mind-boggling. It's amazing to think that humans were creating art that long ago.
It is. So the painting itself depicts several wild pigs, and it's done in this vibrant red ochre. It really speaks to the observational skills of these early humans, their artistic talent, maybe even their spiritual beliefs. It's like a window into their world.
It gives you chills, doesn't it? Connecting with our ancestors across such a vast span of time.
It really does. And for the archaeological community, this discovery is huge. It challenges our assumptions about when and where art began. It's a reminder that we're still piecing together the puzzle of our past.
Absolutely. Speaking of the past, let's shift our focus a bit closer to home. I wanted to talk about the inscription of Assam's Charidio Moidams on the UNESCO World Heritage List.
Oh, yes. That's a fantastic achievement for India. It recognizes the cultural and historical significance of these ancient burial grounds.
So for those who might not be familiar, what are the Charidio Moidams?
They're basically these pyramid-like structures, the final resting place for the Ahom dynasty. And the Ahom dynasty ruled Assam for over 6 centuries.
Wow, that's a long time.
It is. So these moidums, they're more than just architectural marvels. They're like time capsules preserving the history and heritage of the Ahom people.
So what can we learn from them?
They offer insights into burial practices, religious beliefs, artistic traditions. Each mound contains artifacts, inscriptions, intricate carvings. It's a treasure trove of information about this period of Assamese history.
It's wonderful that these structures are getting global recognition. Hopefully this will not only boost tourism, but it'll also ensure that they're protected and preserved for future generations.
That's absolutely. It's a reminder of how important it is to safeguard our cultural heritage. Okay, ready for a change of pace?
Always.
Let's travel from the ancient past to the vibrant present to a phenomenon that's taken the world by storm, K-pop.
K-pop. It's everywhere, isn't it?
It is. Korean pop music has become a global sensation. Catchy tunes, amazing choreography, those stunning visuals, it's captivating audiences worldwide.
It's definitely more than just music, though, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. K-pop is a cultural force. It's reshaping the entertainment landscape. It's influencing fashion, beauty, even language learning. People are traveling to Korea just to experience this firsthand.
It's incredible. Why do you think it's become so popular?
Well, it's a combination of things. The music itself is catchy and well-produced, of course. But there's also the whole visual aspect, those elaborate music videos, the stunning performances, and then there's the marketing.
Oh, yeah. The K-pop industry is very good at marketing.
They are. They've created this whole ecosystem, with fan clubs, social media engagement, all sorts of things. They're really good at connecting with their fans. And it's created this global community, people from all over the world who share this passion for K-pop. It's amazing to see.
It's amazing how music can transcend borders like that, create these connections across cultures.
It really is. K-pop is a great example of soft power, of how Asian culture is increasingly influencing the global landscape.
Okay, for our final stop on this cultural journey, let's delve into something a bit more, I don't know, ethically complex. I'm talking about neuro rights.
Oh, yes, neuro rights. It's a relatively new field, but it's becoming increasingly important as technology advances.
So for those who are unfamiliar, can you explain what neuro rights are all about?
Sure. It's basically about protecting the human brain and its cognitive functions.
Okay.
As neuroscience and neurotechnology advance, we're developing tools that can read our thoughts, influence our emotions, even control our behavior. It's exciting, but it also raises some serious ethical questions.
It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's becoming a reality. So neuro rights are about establishing ethical guidelines, legal frameworks to ensure that these powerful technologies are used responsibly.
So it's about safeguarding our mental privacy, our autonomy, in a world where technology is increasingly able to access and manipulate our brains.
Exactly. It's a new frontier, and we need to be prepared. We need to have these conversations as a society. We have to make sure that technological progress doesn't come at the expense of our cognitive freedom, our human dignity.
Wow, that's some heavy stuff to think about.
It is, but it's important.
Absolutely. Well, with that thought-provoking topic, we've come to the end of our deep dive. We've covered so much ground today, from the intricacies of the Indian economy to the rise of global phenomena like K-pop.
We've analyzed complex issues, debated controversial topics, and celebrated some pretty remarkable achievements. I hope you found it insightful.
I know I have. It's been a whirlwind tour of current affairs. And remember, this was just the beginning. The journey of learning and exploration never really ends, does it?
It doesn't.
So keep diving deep, keep asking questions, keep challenging your assumptions, and never stop learning. That's what the deep dive is all about.
That's it.
Thanks for joining us, and until next time.